The time is 7:30. I call the October 17th meeting of Yardley Borough Council to order. Please stand for the pledge to our flag. Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Mary Ann.
Mr. Applebaum?
Present.
Mr. Curtin?
Present.
Ms. Siegel-Morris?
Present.
Mr. Feiner?
Present.
Mr. Carlson?
Present.
Ms. Scherer? Present. Ms. Thompson?
Present.
Thank you.
We have a quorum. We'll move on to community announcements. Any community announcements from the table? Councilperson Applebaum?
Yes, Madam President, just wanted to remind people that Canaloween experienced Yardley's annual event along the canal between the Mary Yardley Bridge and Afton Avenue Bridge, featuring over 300 carved and lighted jack-o'-lanterns, kicks off Sunday, October 29th at sundown. Canaloween runs from October 29th through November 4th. On the same Sunday, October 29th, Experience Yardley will also be hosting residents, adults and children, for Carvathon, which is located at the Pico lot, Morgan and Fold Streets, between noon and 3 p.m., where they will carve the pumpkins. So please check Experience Yardley's social media and website for further details. Madam President, would you like me to say anything about TAG or just...
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. As many are aware, we recently passed an ordinance on graffiti. I wanted to let people know that the project is fully funded now and that we can call in reports of graffiti at any time and have it removed for free. If you see graffiti, and I will put out something with more specifics, but just for your information, you can call the following phone number, 267-550-9999. All you need to do is leave your name, information about where the graffiti is located, and your phone number, and they will respond very quickly, maybe within the next day, to remove, not just paint over, but actually remove the graffiti, helping make the restored towns look, and to make sure that we're not having this kind of clutter. And that's it.
Excellent. And I believe we're still looking for more volunteers for Carvathon and Canaloween, correct?
Yes, I would suggest that they check the social media accounts for Experience Yardley and the website. There will be sign-ups there.
Thank you. Any other community announcements from the table? All right, I'm required to open the meeting up for public comment, even though we are lacking public this evening. This is the portion of the meeting where members of the public can address council on matters not on the agenda. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Going once, going twice, closed. We will move on to the consent agenda dated October 17th, 2023, which includes approval of the minutes dated October 3rd, 2023, certificate of appropriateness 23-34, 57 South Main Street for a sign, consideration of FEMA-funded 45 South Delaware Ave elevation payment certificate number 4, consideration of FEMA-funded 77 Morgan Ave elevation payment certificate number 2, consideration of Mary Yardley Pedestrian Bridge Payment Certificate Number 3, and consideration of North Main Street Sidewalk Project Phase 2 Change Order Number 3. Do any members of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? I.e., if you have any questions on any of these items, you should ask that they be removed. Hearing no requests, I would consider a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Councilperson Curtin, seconded by Councilperson Feiner. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. All right, this is where we're going to do things a little bit differently this evening. This is a working session, so everyone should consider this to be a little bit like an extended attendance at a committee of council meeting. So we're going to have more informal discussions. We do have some matters of business that we need to vote on, but if you feel like you want to get up and sit out there, that would be fine. If that would help conversation move more smoothly, we can take notes if we want on any items on the board here, or Patty volunteered to take notes. So just keep that in mind as we move through. We're trying not to have this feel just like all of our other meetings. So I will turn things over to Councilperson Siegel Morris for the public safety portion.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, for discussion, we had the retention appointment of police officer first class for Dakota Romberger and officer, sorry, Clark, I'm addressing you incorrectly, will be taking over for a minute.
Okay. Officer Dakota Romberger was appointed as a part-time YBPD officer on March 3rd, 2020. On October 18th, 2022, Officer Romberger was appointed as a full-time officer from the competitive list of qualified applicants resulting from the Borough Civil Service Commission examination. In accordance with the collective bargaining agreement between Yardley Borough Police Department and the Borough of Yardley, Officer Romberger's probationary year is set to expire today, August 17th, 2023. Officer Romberger earned the 2021 Chief's GEM Award for duties above and beyond patrol. In addition, since his full-time appointment on October 18th, 2022, Officer Romberger has handled 1,223 calls for service, issued 174 traffic citations, continuously liaised between Abrams Hebrew Academy for Children Outreach and Visitation, maintained a field training and evaluation manual for newly hired officers and assisted in field training, handled the coordination of police vehicle maintenance with outstanding results, has strengthened existing relations with residences and businesses alike, continued to conduct background investigations on newly hired officers and interns, has not been the subject of any sustained internal affairs or citizens' complaints, and has conducted himself in representation of the department's core values. During this probationary period, Officer Romberger has been evaluated. Officer Romberger received the grade of outstanding performance. During the evaluation, it was noted of Officer Romberger, quote, "You have consistently demonstrated a willingness to go above and beyond for the department, and you are always the first to step up when needed."
On behalf of the Public Safety Committee of the Yardley Borough Council, I hereby motion that Officer Romberger be retained as full-time civil service police officer effective October 17th, 2023, and he be appointed as police officer first class, non-monetary appointment, consistent with the other full-time permanent police officers.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, seconded by Councilperson Curtin. Discussion?
I have a question about the process, which is great, even though there's no public, well, they're out there in the cloud, but I think over time, people will learn how this works, and as will we. So still seems like kind of the old mechanism, so we're still just doing it that way until we move into discussion, or is this that discussion part?
So it happened that there were a few items that still needed to be addressed this evening, but we will be discussing headcount as it relates to the budget, as I believe you're aware from your
Yes.
discussions with general government. So it kind of related to that.
Okay.
So if you have any questions about headcount at this point, we can go into that or save it for later.
I'll save it for later, yeah, thank you.
I think this was sort of regular way. It's been a year, he's performed as we hoped and expected, so this is more perfunctory as long as we agree with that.
I'm just going to go off script here for a moment. I'd like to say for my part that I think we're really blessed to have him. I think he's been a great asset to the department.
That's great to hear.
Agreed.
Yes, Agreed. I seconded. He's always at every event that I go to, especially with the outreach to the children that you mentioned. He's great with the students at Abrams and any events we have with kids in town. They all love him, so I agree. We're lucky to be retaining him full-time. All right, any other comments, questions, concerns? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0.
The other item Public Safety has on the agenda for this evening are the addition of stop signs to both Letchworth Avenue and East College Avenue. As background, we had some citizen concerns about the speed of traffic on those roads, as those are through traffic roads from Main Street to Delaware Avenue. People are concerned that people are missing stop signs or speeding up between them, or just I guess in general, causing unsafe conditions for children and pedestrians on those streets. Paula and Chief drove and checked those streets out and looked at potential spots for stop signs, and it's suggested that they be added to all intersecting streets.
Longshore and East College, Longshore and Letchworth.
So what Public Safety is looking to do is to ask the solicitor to draft an ordinance to add stop signs to those streets. So that is what we're here to discuss this evening, whether council would agree to have an ordinance drafted to add additional stop signs to Letchworth and East College.
So I think this is one where I think we've heard from the public, right? I think we've also driven these. I feel like there is one, and I think it's Bell. We have one coming down at Bell, and you definitely feel like you come over speaking of Letchworth, you come over the canal, and then you sort of slow down right away because the stop sign's there, and then people accelerate after that all the way down to Delaware Avenue, and then coming from it, you make the turn on Delaware, and you kind of accelerate until you get to stop there. So this is meant to address kind of a halfway point at Longshore to keep calming measures on both East College and Letchworth.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good solution, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we have a 1 square mile borough, and there are people who think that you usually don't live in the borough, who think that the borough is like this thing that's in their way, and they're trying to get somewhere else. And I think we need to put a stop to that any way we can. This is a start, but I think it's just the beginning. I question why our speed limit is 25 miles an hour on residential 1-block streets, for example. And I'd like to know, I saw the other day a car speed on East Afton, like right where the bridge or the canal is, and like, and almost like catch air. And people cross the street, there's no crosswalk there. I think we have an issue that goes beyond, it's a public safety issue, but it goes beyond public safety because it has to do with public works and has to do with where the hot spots are, where this kind of behavior is happening, which unfortunately seems to have gotten worse. Police department is doing a great job, but it can't be on you to find all the people who act like that. And I just don't want, I see more kids around town. Traffic calming is always like on the top when I ask people what's going on in town. And I think, this is great, but I think it should be the beginning. That's the main point. I'd like to figure out what the top 10 spots that need attention are. And
I would guess these are top 2, because this seems to be Main Street in Delaware, the main thoroughfares to get down that way, but that doesn't mean there aren't others, but yeah.
circumvention.
And Breeze, which we handled already with the
Yeah.
speed humps. So I know after we did Breeze, put the speed humps in, every other cross street there came in and requested speed humps. So I guess out of this, I think we probably should have a little more clarity for the public on what our process is to add a stop sign, what our process is to add a crosswalk, what our process is to add speed humps. What are the boxes that need to be checked in order for their street to qualify? I think that's something we could very easily type up and put on the website or something. So if somebody was looking for that information, they could find it, because we're going to add stop signs here, and I think we're going to have people in the next couple meetings coming in and asking for stop signs on their street as well. So
I love the idea of putting it on the website and just having a way that people can alert us, because I wouldn't know, that, you know, I know in my part of town, but I don't go in other areas enough to know where is the, you know, like, you know, every block has its issues, and people who live there know what happens there a lot. And I would start with, you guys are there all the time, so maybe you probably could bring, I'd like a comprehensive list of those spots.
Problem
And then-
areas.
Yeah, and then I think if public safety could include public works in figuring it out, because some of it might be structural more than just like stop signs, and maybe other things that, you know, that could be done. Well, especially in terms of like the comprehensive plan could be, you know, included in that for next year, like things that we, longer range streetscaping or whatever on certain blocks.
I think you can add Canal Street too. You guys did speed humps there too.
Yeah. And that, of course, needs to be lined up with paving to save money. So significantly more expensive to do it when we're not paving. Any other discussion on stop signs? Is there a motion to instruct our solicitor to draft the ordinance for the new stop signs?
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, seconded by Councilperson Finer. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Let's get the other normal business items out of the way, and then we'll move into our, the meat and potatoes, as Paula would say, of our meeting. Consideration of Resolution 23-09 Joint LSA Grant Application with Gather Place. Solicitor Closter, you want to take this one?
Sure, I think we discussed this in the last meeting a little bit. This is a requirement to essentially authorize the application for the grant. Again, it would be the grant, if it is received, would benefit the Gather Place. However, the borough would be the grantee, so it's essentially a pass-through situation. If successful, we would need an agreement with the Gather Place, between the borough and the Gather Place, essentially a sub-grant agreement to ensure compliance with all the program requirements and such forth. So this is the first step, and it authorizes the submission of the application.
Are there any questions, or I guess we can have a motion on the table first?
I guess one other point, the draft resolution in your packets, the amount of the grant to be applied for was blank. I understand there's still some investigation into, you know, what that amount would be. So it seems appropriate for council to approve the resolution to allow for an application of up to $100,000 for the grant amount, with the final amount to be determined, you know, in conjunction with the Gather Place.
Do I hear a motion to adopt Resolution 23-09 up to $100,000, final amount to be determined?
So moved.
Second. Motion was made by Councilperson Applebaum, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Discussion? All those in favor?
Just a question.
Yes.
I assume all of the grant writing and the whole grant thing is being done by Gather, right?
Yes.
So we're just passing it through, we're just using this through, okay.
No cost to the borough, in other
Right.
words. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. And the 2022, is that right?
Because it's actually the 2022 data that they're collecting.
To 2026 recycling agreement.
Want me to take this?
Mr. Johnson, yes.
Sure. This is a 5-year agreement with Huff and Associates, who we've been working with for the past 5 years, who collect our residential recycle data. They prepare a grant application and submit it along with other municipalities in Lower Bucks County. We've upped our income from these grants considerably since they started doing it, because it is a collective grant with other municipalities who collect millions of tons, as opposed to our borough, who collects a small amount. So they do get a little bit of the award. I believe it's up to $19.50 or less, depending on how much our award is. So it's been working. They do all the legwork, they do all the paperwork, they do everything. We just pretty much collect the award once it's done.
Paul, can you just explain, so the recycling is collected physically by the trash, as part of our trash contract?
Yes.
Huff Associates is a consultant that provides data on how much recycling we're doing so that we can apply for
So they go to the trash haulers,
Right.
and they find out from the trash haulers how much was taken out of Yardley Borough, how much was taken out of Ben Salem, Lower Makefield, because all the recycling yards have all this. So they collect all this data, they put it together into the grant, and they submit it,
Right.
and we get the money.
So this is, essentially no cost to us, recouping a benefit for the borough for participating in recycling through our trash contract. And then we share a portion of the grant. There's no fee for Huff Associates. They take up to 25% of the award, capped at $19.50.
What was the award last year?
It's over 9,000.
Yeah. It's about,
Our net to us. It was over
Yes.
9,000. It's not-
I don't say it's free money, but it kind of is, right? I mean, it's kind of, yeah.
Close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does fluctuate every year how much we get. When I first started with the borough 25 years ago, I used to do the recycling grant, and I had to go through and get all the cut sheets and everything from the trash haulers and stuff, and I think we would make $1,000 to $2,000 with that. So doing this was a considerable increase on what we're getting, so it's a win-win for the borough.
When we looked at this, like 2 years ago, like, part of how much you get is a function of how much the state appropriates for this, and then how much total recycling there is. So we're kind of we're just making sure we get our share of what that is. If we recycle more, doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna get more, because we're such a small piece of the total amount of recycling done in the state, but we're just getting our share.
So it's the data, it's not the fact.
This is the data. That's right.
That's great. Do I hear a motion to accept the recycling agreement?
So moved.
I'll,
Go, Michelle.
motion was made by Councilperson Curtin, second by Councilperson Scherer. Further discussion or questions on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0.
And then just one more thing, I just need consensus of council to accept the bills list that was in your packet.
Any issues on the bills list from anyone? Have our consensus?
And then next, it's the budget presentation. Okay, here we go again. So we are presenting the 2024 preliminary budget for adoption. As we have been doing the past several years, the 2024 budget follows the 2023 format by individual funds, 16 in all. The budget adheres to the guidelines by the Pennsylvania Chart of Accounts for Local Governments published by the DCED. Next. As you are aware, we have been extremely busy here in Yardley Borough. We've had quite a productive year. We've had many accomplishments, some of which I will highlight in the next few slides. One of our major accomplishments in 2023 was the Phase 2 of the North Main Street sidewalks. This went out to bid in June of 2022. The total cost of this project was $858,000, which included engineering and construction costs. The borough received over $700,000 in grants towards this project, but some of these grants had matches. Since the total cost of the project was over the grant amount, we had to pay the difference, obviously, and the matches, which was approximately $240,000. We have about $34,000 left to pay at the end of 2023 once the final inspections and closeouts occur. Our next big accomplishment is the Mary Yardley Bridge. As you are aware, this project took many years to complete and get moving. We are proud to include this as one of our major accomplishments for this year. The project went out to bid in August of 2022. The total cost is $359,000. After grants and donations, which totaled $181,000, the borough's responsibility was $178,000. Police and emergency management. A lot of good things happened with the police department in 2023. Most of all this came with no taxpayer dollars. We now have fixed license plate readers on Main and Afton, as well as two police cars. A total value of this equipment is approximately $70,000. We updated 8 body cameras. We updated 1 mobile data terminal with grants. Again, all of this was no taxpayer dollars. The current police budget is expected to end in 2023, $35,000 under budget, which will help to cover the promotion of an additional officer. As you are aware, we must go through the civil service process to hire, promote to full-time. This process consists of a written test, a physical test, and an interview panel by local Bucks County chiefs. Once all the scores are compiled, an official list is published. This list is valid for 2 years. Since we are still within those timelines, we will not have to redo any of this testing. This reduces the dependency of part-time officers whose availability is limited. We are retaining an officer who is vested into our community. This will ensure our police department continues to provide exceptional service to the community 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. Next, the Pico lot. Because of receiving grant funding from Senator Sanacero, we are able to move forward with the purchasing of the Pico lot. We ordered and received an updated appraisal of this lot. We're in the process of completing a Phase 1 environmental assessment. The purchase agreement was sent to Pico for final signatures. Once this occurs, we will schedule for closing. Purchasing this lot will increase our CRS points by having more open space to help the residents within the floodplain and provide a passive park for all of the borough to enjoy. Next. We've had many more accomplishments in 2023. Just to name a few, we have a new 3-year trash contract with a 2-year option. Although this is an increase to our residents, other surrounding communities are seeing up to a 40% increase for the next year, and we are not seeing this 40% increase to us. FEMA elevations. We completed 4 elevations and 2 additional ones are under construction. The remaining 4 should be completed in 2024. The borough received an additional FEMA grant to elevate 2 additional properties, one in the Flats and one in Rivermar, which we anticipate completing in 2024 as well. So now we're just going to talk about the general fund, which, as you know, is our biggest and most active fund. Just in the general fund for 2023, you will see in this slide highlights of favorable and unfavorable revenue. Because of being fiscally responsible and closely monitoring and managing our budget, we expect to end 2023 with a net favorable income of $75K. As you can see, we are up in inspection fees, interest, police, special police services, just to mention a few. Don, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, basically, this is the income side of the equation. And, we had 2 that are in red numbers, which is our famous real estate tax. We looked in their crystal ball last year and said we'd hit 150,000, and we're going to end at about 130, or 30,000 under 120. And some zoning fees, we didn't get as much, there wasn't as much activity with the zoning hearing boards, so we didn't get as much fees. But on the other side, we got a lot of good income. As I've mentioned before, the deal that was cut last July, I think it was, or a year ago July, for us to get the Pliget fund interest rates, we're over 5.1% was our average this year. So we got a lot of interest you see here, 20,000, I think, of extra interest, 20,213. That's just to the general fund. The total interest, when you apply it to all the other funds, was over 80,000. So that's a real help to our budget, because it helps each of the different funds. And even though they're dedicated, it helps them with some extra interest.
I think this is important. This is versus budget, not versus year over year, right? So this is kind of what we budgeted versus how it turned out, not what we did last year. I think the other point on the interest, which is absolutely valid, I think the work that was done, and David Bria was a part, I think, the first one to suggest that we pursue that, which has proved to be, a home run. I think we're also living on some float that we can't count on. I think, as people know, we took a $200,000 loan that we're paying very low interest rate on. We never used those funds. They're sitting in, it was meant to be, we had all those projects that were coming due, and we wanted to make sure we had capital because of the timing and when grants come in. We're now going to start repaying that loan where we were paying, call it 1.5% interest on it. We were getting over 5%. So some of that float will go away as we repay those funds, but it's still going to be a tailwind for us relative to what we've had historically.
And we had a couple other good things fall out of the sky. We had a class action settlement. What was that for again? What was the cause of that? Do you remember?
It was like an MS4, or it was something with stormwater.
Yeah.
That we didn't even know that.
At a state level, but we got a piece of it. It was divvied up to townships. So anyhow, so this is half the story is of favorable income, which helps us towards next year.
Next. Favorable and unfavorable expenses for general fund. So we must mention, along with favorable income of $75K, we have unfavorable expenses of about $19K, which occurred in right-to-knows and code enforcement and building, just to name a few. Again, because of closely managing and watching our expenses, we have a favorable result overall in our general fund, which will take us into 2024 to offset the $53K. Next.
19,000 less than what was budgeted.
Yes, the same thing. This is, the net of this is a 19,000 favorable. Right.
I think it's a couple things on these accounts, and Don, you should chime in too. Some of these are kind of ins and outs, right? So code enforcement and zoning, we don't make a lot of money on that. A lot of that is money comes in, money goes out. So you may see some noise there, but ultimately those are pushing against each other. And, it's great we made some money on snow. That could easily go against us in a big way at any point, right? So some of that is just in any given year, you're going to have what you have, but you got to continue to budget and have money for when you have one of those years where it goes the other way.
Well, that's true. However, on the snow though, but remember, there's dedicated money that goes into that fund.
Sure, absolutely.
So we put money in the snow.
And it stays there.
It's not like we rated it, because you have to do it into streets or whichever one it comes out of. I think it's streets.
Liquid fuel, yeah.
Or liquid fuels, yeah. And so that builds up. So you could have, if we had an average year this year, that fund, if you look at the fund balance, will still be in good shape. Now, if it's 2 times the average of the last 5 years, if we have one of those.
You got to
you're
fund
right.
out a general fund, right?
We might,
Yeah.
but the good thing is it's not, we could carry over the advantage of having a low snow year, carries over to the next year, which is helpful.
And that fund just builds because that helps us to pave our roads as well. So by not having any snow and consistently building in that fund, that's going to allow us to pave the big roads such as a Letchworth that might be next. That could be a couple $100,000. So it's a good thing to have no snow. Just keep that in mind. Next. The slide that you're all waiting for, no tax increase is recommended for 2024. However, we are recommending a millage reallocation by reallocating 0.23 mills from the rec fund to the general fund. This will be bringing in an additional $8,000 to the general fund. Over the past several years, the rec fund has been growing consistently. We are in no way taking anything away from the Park and Rec Board to do this allocation. The Park and Rec Board is totally self-sufficient. They rarely use any taxpayer dollars for their many events that they host throughout the year. Next. As I just stated. I'm sorry?
Do you want to wait till the end until we discuss these items, or do you want to go through them one by one?
Totally up to you if you have questions.
With that one, I totally understand the issue there and with the situation where they have
I want to make notes somewhere, and someone's going to go back to this date. Well, why was it allocated lower? And the reason is because they've got 50-something thousand in their fund.
Yeah, I think the punchline is they have,
Can't remove it.
no, we can't take any money out, right? So they have created funds because we charge for a lot of the things that we do here, like the runs and whatnot. And even after making sure we compensate for the extra policing and other costs, they make money, right? And so we've left that money in that fund because that's where it goes. So we need to fund it, there's less of a need to continue to fund it with tax dollars.
So it's not a temporary. It's just
No, this is,
moving forward. This is what it is.
it's just $8,000 a year that rather than feeding a fund that we think is already overfunded, will give us more flexibility to use it across all the stuff we do.
And if something changes down the road, we can change those allocations again. And this is something that we did change allocations for the rec fund in the past, because it was underfunded at one point, and I think that was probably about 2019. Yeah, we had to take from another to give to the rec fund, just to give them a little bit of bump. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to clarify that we're not bringing it down to zero because we do use that money to care for our parks, right?
Absolutely, yes. There's still a portion of our tax dollars going to the rec fund, because that does, like Council President Thompson said, like, we're taking care of our parks, we're mowing, we're doing all that kind of stuff, so.
And we're adding to it with the Pico lot and you know,
Right.
And also we get, occasionally, I don't have the exact numbers, but I do think that there are more toddlers in town and people use the top lot.
Oh, sure.
That damage that happens and you maintain that, and then, in the past, people say, well, it's expensive to maintain, we don't have the funds, so I want to make sure we're, obviously
But
we are,
to put it in perspective, at the end of '22, we had $49,700, call it $50,000 balance in the fund at the end of '22. At the end of '23, we expected to be around 50,000, basically flat. We're projecting we're going to end this year at 58. So we're going to grow up by $8,000. Just this year, we grow up by $8,000. And we're just taking half of that back. We're projecting we'll be at 54 at the end of 2024. So at the end of 2024, we're still going to be roughly 10% higher than we were at the end of '22. So it's a very minor change, in my opinion. Which I say there, yeah, we're going to be up by 9% by the end of 2024.
Okay, next. And since we recommend reallocating, on this slide, you will see how a mill is calculated and what it means to the borough. So 1 mill is approximately $34,000. Do you want me to go through all of these? Anybody have any questions about the mill?
Only question I wouldn't have, if you remember it, the pie, the value of per Bucks County, has that changed significantly from last year to this year? In other words, are people getting reassessments and getting lower, or is it going up because of new buildings, or don't you know?
I don't know.
Yeah. I recall I thought it was 34,000 something last year. Wasn't it 34 and something? Yeah. It's a little more.
And then every month or so, we do get a new value that we have to use for our mill from the county. So that does fluctuate, so we want that to go up a little higher, but if not, this is where we're at right now. Okay. Next. Here is a graph where the taxes are dispersed amongst our various funds. General purposes, which is our main operating account. So there's about $842,000 in there, which is about 80% of our tax revenue. Fire protection is about $30,000, which is about 2.8%. Street improvement is about $38,000, which is about 3.7%. Street lighting is about $30,000, which is about 2.8%. Ambulance and rescue squad is about $19,000, which is about 1.9%. Recreation, $16,000, which is 1.5%. And capital reserve is about $70,000, which is 6.7%. Next. Here is a high-level view of our budgeted 2024 expenses. As most municipalities, public safety is our biggest expenditure, followed by executive, legal, engineering, and so on. Executive, which consists of many line items such as day-to-day operations of the office, including full, part-time personnel, payroll services, taxes, insurances, and so on. We have public safety, public works, engineering, legal, zoning, code, parks and rec, government, general government building. Next. Future projects in Yardley Borough, elevations. As you know, elevations is huge in Yardley Borough. Elevations will continue into 2024. 55 houses have already been elevated in total, elevating the remaining 6 houses from the 2023 project. This project will be completed in 2024 and continue to help our CRS, which is a community rating systems ratings. Current rating is an 8, which gives our NFIP policyholders a 10% reduction in their flood insurance policy, and we're hoping to get to the next increment probably next year. Phase 3 of the sidewalks, we will continue to seek additional grants or downscope the project in various ways. Capital Reserve will continue to fund 2 mills through our tax allocation to get the balance in 2024 to approximately $300,000. We are actively looking into getting a grant for digitizing our property records. Advantages of doing this is that all the records will be easily accessible to anyone, which will help with right-to-knows and for future homeowners and even office personnel. Any associated decisions, such as a hearing, zoning hearing board condition, will be in one location as opposed to now where we're still searching old boxes and files for information. That takes a lot of time away from our other tasks. And I just want to take a moment to thank Patty for all her help with this, General Government Committee, and all of council for the time that they put into the budget season this year. We took a lot of time away from family members that came here and sat with us for going over all this and missing sporting events and stuff, so I do appreciate everybody chipping in and helping out. And that is the end of our presentation. I said we were going to do a mic drop and say, "Go Phils." So that is it.
I will say one thing just to, for general government, and I want to thank Don in particular for the amount of work he's put in. When I came on council about 4 years ago, I think the team had done a really good job of forecasting and itemizing everything that we had on 1-year increments, and we knew we had the ability to look out beyond that, but we looked at things mostly from a year-to-year basis. And I think what Don has done a great job of working with Paula and Patty on is looking out multiple years, right? We have civil service contracts with our police force. We know when the contractual increases are going to be. We have things that fluctuate, like snow comes and goes. We have real estate transfer taxes that spike and trough, but you can't look at things just based on 1 year because we're running the borough, on a run rate basis, right? So I think a lot of the work that we did, that Don did, frankly, in forecasting and looking at those expenses and making some assumptions around revenue allowed us to make a really informed decision around how we would think about, police funding, which is obviously the biggest part of our general government expenses. So I appreciate all the time you spent on that.
Yeah, what we really wanted to do this year was to look at budget, and we started really looking closely at budget earlier in the year, much earlier in the year. And we did that by looking at historical and making it a monthly budget. So we knew, we did the July numbers. I know they're sick of me coming in, but we do the July numbers, we did August, we did September's in there. So we see what's happening, and we have a good handle on what we think we're going to spend in the next 3 months. And then the other thing we did go out and do longer 6-year projection of police force and the trade-off of part-time versus full-times. And that's why in this budget, we are recommending the promotion to another full-time person. Because when you look at the math over the 6-year period, it makes sense to do. It's a little bit of a spike in year one of about $25K hit in year one. But then what we did is we got together with the chief, we rolled up our sleeves, we looked line item by line item, and if you saw in the favorable expenses, the biggest favorable was his department, $35K favorable. So the things that we're doing this year are helping fund that switch next year, where we'll get one more officer out there that's full-time and, offset by some less part-time hours, which are getting hard to fill anyway.
I think that's a key part of it. We've got a great full-time force. I think we feel like despite the fact that it can be a little transient because they're looking for full-time jobs, right? They don't always stay as long as we'd like. We've had great part-time people, we just can't find them, right? And so quality, I was initially, from a purely budgetary perspective, hesitant about the idea of hiring a full-time officer rather than continuing to fund with part-time from my general government seat. From my public safety seat, I saw all the reasons why that made a ton of sense. And I will give Chief a lot of credit and Don, the time that they spent actually looking at it. Once you factor in what it's really going to cost us to continue to churn part-time people and the increased rate hourly and the amount of training and time that goes into that, adding another first-time person, even with some of the contractual increases in year 3 and year 5 that we now have forecasted, we still think it's a win. And obviously, from a public safety perspective, we feel like it gives us, more full-time people that are invested and that, are part of the fabric of what we're doing. And when we hire somebody full-time, they typically stay for a long time.
And for instance to that, we had as you all know, a draft agenda that went out on Friday, and on there was the hiring of a part-time police officer. From Friday to Saturday morning, that changed. He got offered a full-time job, so I think it's important to really grab who's here, who's vested into this community, and keep them with us for as long as we can. Because it's getting harder and harder, as Adam will tell us, to find these part-time people because everybody's hiring.
So on this issue, just on the economic side of it, I like how you split it into two. It's true, they're two separate. So just on the economic side, and I think I didn't even hear you mention this other part too, which is that how many part-time officers would get replaced by one full-time officer?
Well, it depends, because different ones work so many hours, it's not a,
Ballpark 4 or 5 of them.
Well, if you think about it, I think of it this way, 40 hours a week, right? And so, right? So I'd say we typically today would have 3 or 4 people that would need to get to that amount of hours.
So purely economically, and in terms of like how an organization or a police department is going to run, the fact that you have to, on a part-time basis, recruit people 4 to 6 times as often, and then train them, and then those people have to know the environment, so they've got to get up to speed, get up to speed constantly every week because there are things that happen they don't know about. Efficiency-wise, it's like a total no-brainer. Even if it was more expensive, it's still a no-brainer because it's not that big a difference. And when you distribute it to the number of people in town, you're probably talking like, very, very small, like, less than $1 a month or something.
Right.
Versus what you get out of it, which is a fully invested. The differences, I mean, for you guys, it's huge to work with somebody who's here 40 hours a week. So, and obviously for the public safety, there's the idea that community policing, they know everybody, there's a small town. And you know people in town here very quickly. So, but then,
You guys have worked it out in such a way that
actually, we don't even see the impact, at least not for several years. I can't find any fault with that, only I'm just impressed by it, and the tightness of the budget process.
part of it is looking at other pockets, and one of the things is, on the police budget, there was 10,000 for capital in the budget. We ended up only spending one, but we really spent all 10, but we went and got grants for 9 grand that we weren't planning on at the beginning of the year. So it's not like, we're not functioning what we want to do and buying the things that we need to buy.
I think part of it was that we actually looked at the number, we really did dig in, and Don was the real linchpin of this, of like, there's a lot of sound bites, and we have so many things that we're all thinking about, and you sort of can latch on to, okay, well, it's 40,000 going to 64, going to 90, and how, okay, well, a mill's 34,000, how do I reconcile that without, but when you look at all the other puts and takes and you forecast all that out along with all of our other officers, it wasn't nearly as bad, and sitting down with Chief, I think, was a very good use of time to walk through and get his perspectives on it too.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also, who knows what happens in 5 years. more valuable to somebody who's been around for 5 years because they've learned the job and they know it.
Yeah.
More. But the other factor is that, and there was an article recently how the time has increased in Dutch County. There's kind of an overflow from Philadelphia. They're feeling that in the southern part of the county, that borders Philadelphia. But, we haven't, I actually would love to get your input on it, but I know that there's sort of peripherally, you can kind of see there's a bit of a creep. And we've maintained, it still feels like we're in a very safe spot here. But it seems like there's more work. Is it?
Well, I don't have any data on this off the top of my head, just anecdotally, I notice it. Like, I've noticed, and not just here in the borough, we share a radio zone with Newtown Borough, Newtown Township, Upper Middle Wakefield. And so just what I hear in the radio traffic, I hear more break-ins, more burglaries, more car thefts than I used to, in all of the surrounding area.
Can I just mention something in terms of just the budget in general? I didn't want to get you off track.
No, that's fine.
So I've unfortunately seen a lot of budgets go through this community, and I can remember on council, we used to do it, we'd be here till midnight in public sessions, just hashing budget lines. And I think the changes happened over the recent years. I think Caroline was on the council that brought kind of the idea of making a more readable budget, right, with the public, and started that process to where this council is and this staff is today with this analysis and this presentation. Congratulations to all of you who are a part of that process, because you really raised the bar in terms of where you're at now, and that's good for the community, good for the residents, and you guys are happy. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, to add to that, when I came on council in 2013 or 14, I was the chair of general government, and there wasn't even cash flow knowledge back then. It was just a primitive. There was nothing that was wrong. It was based on it's a historic old borough, and it was just done a certain way, and that technology hadn't caught up yet. And it's come a long way in 10 years. And a lot of people from the community also need to get credit for that, who volunteered.
It was a whole process. No?
Yeah.
Yeah, ditto. I agree with so much of what you've said. I agree with what you've said, Mayor. I am, as a resident, not as a council person, I love the idea of hiring another full-time officer, because I decided to move to Yardley, not another community. I bought into the idea that we would have our own local police force. And, Officer Clark sometimes ignores me, but I'll wave to him as I'm driving by. And it's not deliberate? Oh, okay. But on a serious note, it's not just me. It's so many of the, what do we have, 1,100 households? It's not a big community. And if we can maintain these officers over a long period of time, it's just that much better, which is why maybe our community is a little bit nicer, a little bit safer, and I feel good about it. And I extend my thanks to you and the rest of the police force.
Can we segue into, so we kind of jumped into the budget and a new full-time police officer is one of the biggest changes. Can we go through any other big changes, as well as any big assumptions we're making or unknowns? Thinking about our conversation we had today about the comprehensive plan, that's a huge unknown for next year, how much that's going to cost. So let's talk about how good we feel about the numbers, which ones are spongy, et cetera.
Yeah, the one that real estate transfer tax revenue is always a tough one to predict. So we went conservative with that. We budgeted 150 this year. We're going to end at 120. We're going to 120 next year. We're not going to say it's going to bounce back higher than that. But it could be even lower, maybe. I don't know. The one good thing about that dynamic that's going on is, I'm sure everybody knows who follows real estate at all, is when properties go on, they're selling quickly.
Right away, right.
So from when a property goes on, it can almost predict when we're going to get the real estate transfer tax, because 2 cycles later, we're going to get it. Whereas in the old days, when your house is for sale for 6 months, you never know. But obviously there is limited inventory. The other dynamic that's kind of interesting is the work upstairs here of inspections and stuff. That revenue is up. So my personal opinion is I think you've got people who have a nice low mortgage rate, so they're not going to move out. So we're not going to move out, but let's do a little more work on our place, do more fix-up stuff, have more work doing on some of the businesses here, so that's favorable. The other areas that we had to add some stuff in, talking about comprehensive plan historically for the planning group, we don't spend any external money really to speak of. We put $5,000 in there in the budget for next year, but that's going to be a challenge. We're going to get together with Planning Commission and work on how we get through this comprehensive plan that needs to be done this year, every 10 years, and how we can put the scope on it and use other resources. The county just did theirs 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. For the county to do their numbers, they must have had to know a lot of data points of each of the towns, so maybe we can leverage that and not reinvent the wheel. So we got to get creative there. We are
Next year's a police car, I think, right?
yes, right.
So we have in our cycle of every 2 years, that is factored in.
We anticipated challenges in insurances. I can speak for my own personal insurance. It seems like this has been a year where insurance rates are going up significantly. So we're working with several different companies to get comparative quotes in here, and it's looking, we don't have finals in yet, but it's looking like that might even end up being a favorable. So there's an example of something that if you just let it go, it's going to go up on you, but if you put some spotlight on it, you can control it. But that is a wild card that could be a problem. Of course, the big item that is unpredictable is the efforts that we have to pay to outside counsels, particularly concerning right-to-know requests. We spent a lot of money in that in the past, and we were significantly over this year too. But it's been much better here in the second half of the year. And so we're hoping it will stay at a reasonable rate next year. I'm trying to think what other big things changed. The rest are.
Feeling as far as our readiness for storm.
Well, so that's exactly where I was going. So that's income statement on balance sheet. So we'll start, we have a little over $300,000 in capital reserve. That will go down by around 100 with the next principal payment of the line of credit. Go back 4 years ago, emergency fund was at like $25,000. That's now at $187,000, right? So I do think that had been depleted. We've also benefited from not having a major flood or water event, right? So that is one of the things that I feel much better about, and we do have a lot of flexibility with how we use that, which is why sometimes it gets depleted, because you could actually use it for general government stuff if you wanted to. But I do feel like we have tried, while we're doing the capital projects, to also beef up our emergency preparedness. We've also put money through capital projects into the annex. I think a lot of that work was done in 2022, so it wasn't on the accomplishments for this year. But some of the work replacing the windows and the roofing to waterproof that, which we're using for equipment and storage of some stuff, hopefully will help us in that event too.
And we also have the emergency fund, which is about 180,000. We'll expect to end at about 180,000
Yeah.
this year.
And the next question, and thank you for that. Next question has to do with, again, some history of the first council I served on hadn't raised taxes in 10 years, and they were very happy with that. Sure, nobody wants to raise taxes. But the result was that the funds got depleted to a point where there had to be a big increase, and then we lost the value of those incremental increases. And what a lot of people I find don't really understand is that even in non-inflationary times, because the assessments don't get, the last time there was a reassessment was in the 70s. So the assessments are stable. So essentially, we're actually, whatever the inflation is, we're making that much less. And our costs are things that tend to go up higher than inflation, like labor and insurance. Now we're in inflationary times. So what I want to be the one to say here, not that anyone wants to raise taxes, but I think people are more accepting of that when the budget is run in a responsible way. That we don't forget, it's good that we're not doing it this year, but that we do even a small incremental increase, every other year, so potentially next year, to keep up with inflation so we don't create that pressure situation and have to backlog it and try to fix the problem in the past and get those funds retrieved like that.
I totally agree. Absolutely agree, yeah.
Look, I think we've done 2 in the last 4 years. We did one in '21, another in '23. Again, small incremental to kind of your, well, '21 was a little larger than small incremental in sort of '23. Look, I feel like, at least as we sit here right now, we're happy that we don't need to do it this year. It'll be a discussion for next council of what you do next year. From my perspective, I think just my own editorial, right? I think the emergency fund is appropriately funded. I mean, in my mind, I had a 250,000, you would sleep wonderfully, and we're getting pretty damn close to that, right? I think capital reserve is an important fund for us because that, to me, that's the source of a match, right? One of the worst things that could happen to us would be like, oh, great, you guys qualified for $1 million grant. All you need to do is come up with $200,000 for your portion, and we're like, oh, we don't have it, right? So I think it's important that that account stays, which allows us to, it remains robust so that we can apply for, bigger grants maybe that come available so we can continue to do big things. And look, I'm also the liaison to the fire company, right? I've spent a lot of time with those guys. Their costs are up dramatically over the last 15, 20 years. And the millage has been constant, and we pay around $30,000 a year. It's an input and then an output. Lower Makefield has dramatically increased their funding. Now, most of the activity for the fire company, relatively speaking, based on population, is there versus here. But still, they're taking on a much higher portion of the cost to fund that, than we are. And they've hired a full-time fire marshal, right, who we are getting arguably some of the benefit of because he's also deputy chief of the fire company. So in my mind, I feel as though that could be an area where at some point, as they decide to hire more full-time firefighters, which is becoming more of a trend, that could be a cost that the borough might be expected to contribute some to. That's not unreasonable, and what we've seen in Newtown and some of the other boroughs in the area that share fire services with their townships. So that, to me, is one area that I think at some point we should maybe think about, is there something to do there to get ahead of that? And I agree, for general government stuff, we're kind of treading water. We're not really getting ahead, right? And if you want to get ahead, then you probably do have to increase revenue.
Yeah, I think there are things like when the Yardley Bridge issue came up, with this rotting bridge, right? And at that point, things happened, people didn't know, does the borough actually own that? That was the first question, right? But if that had been known and planned for, that could have been saved up for over, 5 to 10 years. And so, yeah, getting ahead of it, that's the key, is to look ahead and say, not necessarily what it would be next year, but what will we need in 5 years that would help if we start funding that now.
The other thing too is we need to get better and better at sniffing out where the grant monies are. They can help us not just on the nice-to-have projects, but even helping us on some of the base stuff so that we can offset that. Now it's a small one that was done in the police department, but by going and getting little grants to cover 9,000, we got a 9,000 to the good. So looking for those and searching those out is important too.
Well, to your point, I think Chief does a great job with that. Now, I think it's a little bit easier because it's very clear that this is toward law enforcement, but every time something comes up, he identifies it, he comes up with an action plan, and he figures out where we could use it if it's applicable, right? And so it's a little bit harder. There's things for stormwater, but if you don't have an active stormwater plan, well, you're not going to get that this year. And then, so different years, they have different things, and trying to line up what you're doing with what the grant cycle is, I think is a winner, but it takes a lot of planning to do that.
And it is expensive,
For sure.
We just had this conversation earlier, when
just going to say, you and I just got done talking
The
about
only
it.
way we can really do good projects is with grants,
Fund it.
and then our limitation is how much money do we want to allocate towards grants, because it's so expensive to apply for some of the grants.
Yes.
So that's something that I think is an opportunity to find a way to do that in a more cost-effective way.
And Paul, do we have ARPA money left? We have like a 40 grand or so, right? So that's another piece of, you could view that as additional money in the general fund, or we could just view that as project money or whatever you want to say, but we still have $40,000 left. That's the other part I wanted to make on, that we do have that for a match, overrun, or whatever.
And I think you kind of answered a big question. I feel a lot of people who might be watching this would have about the 24 budget. What capital projects are there? And the answer is we are an extremely grant-reliant town. And we're not able to move, with keeping the village the same, we're not able to move those projects forward unless we get some significant grants in next year.
So that's why this year in 2024, it's important for us to get inputs from planning and inputs from the public on what are those projects that we want to prioritize. You know, we all had the sidewalks and stuff, okay, fine. But let's move forward now. What are the next things we want to do, and make sure we're laser focused on going after grants that support that. And then, but to your point, you're right, in the budget itself, we don't have in there betting on things to come, you know? We don't have in there projects that we may all think are the next ones we should do. They're not in there if the funding isn't already here.
And something, Matt, I'm glad you brought that up, is the fire department and the rescue squad. The volunteers are getting lesser and lesser every year. So it's not just in Yardley Borough or Lower Makefield or Bucks County, it's across the state.
coming.
Everybody's having
It is coming. There will be
personnel
full-time people.
problems. So down the road, they're going to be looking at hiring a fire department for these towns, and that's going to cost a lot of money to the taxpayers. And it's something that I think Yardley Borough needs to start thinking about now, because in the future, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, and it's not immediate. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that, you know,
could be
one
10,
thing,
15 years down the road, but
Right.
it's coming.
you know, I think right now there's one full-time person in Lower Makefield that we have, you know, the benefit of. He's our deputy chief for the company, and I think over time, maybe they hire a driver, maybe, you know, and so slowly, Newtown started with 4, they then went to 8 2 years later, and now this year they're going to 12, right? That's for a large area, Newtown Township, Newtown Borough, et cetera. But that, you know, was a material thing that they incurred. And to Paula's point, it's also with the emergency, you know, the emergency ambulance service, there's just less people volunteering to do it. So it's hard to staff it.
All right, so we, you know, the next two items on the agenda are the preliminary budget and advertising for public inspection, but let's just conclude all discussion on those items now if we can. So any other questions, comments, concerns, or discussion on the budget, presentation? I echo my thanks to everyone who worked on it. Excellent job. So do I hear a motion to adopt the 2024 preliminary budget?
So moved.
I will give it to the gentleman who had pen to paper here. Motion was made by Councilperson Carlson, seconded by Councilperson Curtin. Discussion? And again, just clarifying, this is the preliminary budget. This is not the final budget. We will vote on the final budget
First Tuesday in December.
first Tuesday in December. So there is still time to ask questions about it. Any other discussion here? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. And do I hear a motion to advertise for public inspection the 2024 budget? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Councilperson Scherer, seconded by Councilperson Applebaum. Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Councilperson Scherer, seconded by Councilperson Finer. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 8:39.
Phillies are winning.